Hi Glamazons, welcome back to my channel. Today is the first episode of Glamazon Originals. This is my brand new mini documentary series about luxury, lifestyle and glamour. I'll be doing this series every now and then. Make sure you subscribe to my channel for more so you know when the series will be coming out periodically. Today's episode is about the rise of the African luxury goods market. The African luxury goods market is something that many people don't actually really know about. When people think of the luxury industry, they think of Monaco, Paris, New York, London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and all these other fabulous cities that we love. But actually, many luxury brands that you love, such as Cartier, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, are actually on the continent and they're doing very well. In this documentary, we're going to talk about the African luxury goods industry, we're going to talk about brands, and we're going to talk about who are the African customers who are buying these fabulously expensive luxury products. In this documentary, I'm definitely going to be talking about brands that are on the continent and that are doing very well. We have to make a distinction between brands that are foreign originally and ones that are homegrown. As a general rule, and this is anecdotal based on friends of mine who are African who love luxury products and things that I've seen, African luxury consumers tend to like foreign brands and favor foreign brands over locally homegrown ones, for example. There is this, I wouldn't say stigma is the right word, but I do think there is this preference for foreign brands. It's not really so much an issue about the fact that it's made by Africans, but there's this idea that if something is made in Italy, if something is made in France, that it's probably better. My first example to talk about the rise of the African luxury goods industry is Cartier. For those of you who don't know, obviously Cartier was originally a European brand, and it still is obviously, but Cartier is part of the Richemont group, which is owned by Johann Rupert, who is a very famous South African billionaire. He's part of the Rupert family. If you're from South Africa, you already know about this family, so you don't even need me to prattle away about it. Cartier have one boutique in Africa, as far as I know, or one boutique in South Africa, should I say, and that boutique is in Sandton City, which is, Sandton is like the sort of luxurious kind of Mayfair of Johannesburg, as it were. And they have a boutique in the Sandton City shopping centre. It is the only boutique, as far as I know, that's in South Africa, and it basically covers all of the things that standard, Cartier customers would want. You can buy love bracelets there, you can buy love rings there, you can buy everything, the whole caboodle. I think one of the reasons, obviously Johann Rupert is South African, so naturally you'd want to have a boutique of one of his brands, being Cartier, in South Africa. But I think Cartier being in Johannesburg probably serves different things. First of all, I'm going to make a guess, and I think it's a fairly accurate guess, is that many African luxury consumers are probably from outside South Africa as well. I think there are many South African buyers, but many people will be coming from other parts of Africa to buy luxury goods such as Cartier love bracelets and all these other things. For example, the Lagos to Johannesburg aviation route before the pandemic was the most profitable African aviation route, Lagos to Johannesburg. So that just kind of gives you a sense for the power of inter-African trade, so trade between African countries, but also the fact is there are many African tourists who love going shopping in South Africa. If you're not African, you may not know this, but many African people who have means or have disposable income love going shopping in South Africa. I can't tell you the amount of times that I have myself been in Johannesburg and I have seen and heard all these beautiful other African languages in Sandton City of people doing shopping and people who clearly don't live there. So I think Cartier is one of the brands that has benefited in the rise of like African business people and African entrepreneurs becoming wealthier, which therefore trickles into more luxury spending. And I think luxury connects with African culture in a very specific sense, in that, in a sort of broad sense, us as people, African people like to look gorgeous. We like to look glamorous. We like to show our beauty. So it's not a surprise that people would love to see it in terms of, jewelry and fine jewelry and all these other things. Obviously, Cartier has, expanded into watches, perfume. So they're different price points, and I'm sure that those products also do well. But I'm not surprised to see the Cartier boutique there. I've actually walked past it. It's on one of the top floors of Santon City. There's this like floor called the Diamond Walk, where there are other luxury brands such as Louis Vuitton is there, Gucci is there, Prada. Last time I checked, I believe Versace is there, but I need to double check that, and Zegna. So you have these amazing luxury brands that have taken a chance, and it does seem to be paying off for some of them as well. So that just leads to the question of, who are the people who are shopping in these, like, who are basically the African luxury consumers? Why have they chosen luxury products instead of buying cheaper stuff? One of the biggest things that we constantly hear when it comes to the African consumers, how African customers are extremely price conscious. I believe that this is true, but as someone who's involved in the e-commerce industry in Africa, I don't think it tells the full story. The African consumer market is becoming very fragmented, and it's changing rapidly, especially for fashion, jewelry, beauty, and other lifestyle products. And I think that we're seeing this in the kind of rise of luxury. And I should also say, luxury is not just Cartier. It's not just, bracelets and bangles and watches and rings. Luxury is Porsche. Porsche is one of the top selling luxury brands in Africa. They have a dealership in South Africa. They've been in South Africa since the 50s. They were also in Angola at a certain point. They also opened in Nigeria. I haven't even touched on North Africa, because that's a completely different beast in its own, and North Africans are known for loving luxury, and Vuitton, as far as I know, also is in Morocco. So as you can see, luxury is not just about fashion, okay? And I think that's one of the most exciting things about this. I've started off with Cartier, but I've started off with it to make a point. It's not just about fashion or jewelry. Okay, it's also about, luxury supercars. It's also about luxury property. I can't tell you the amount of luxury property channels based in Africa, from Nigerian YouTubers, Kenyan YouTubers, South African YouTubers, and Ghanaian YouTubers showing off the sort of gorgeous African luxury homes that are being built on this continent. So as you can see, what you see is not necessarily what you get. Now, when we're talking about the African luxury goods industry, we need to talk about who are the people buying Louis Vuitton in South Africa. Who is buying Gucci in, South Africa? Who is buying Cartier? Who are these people? I have a pretty good idea based on research, anecdotal little tidbits that I'm going to share, and my general kind of reading of this market, which I'm so passionate about and I love so much. The African luxury market, obviously, is a massive generalization what I'm going to say. African luxury consumers are going to be different to South African ones or to East African ones. But in general, some of the things that we can see are, these are people who want something that makes them stand out. Yeah, most African consumers are price conscious, but someone who wants something luxury, they want something that basically will make them stand out, but also will make them feel different. Okay, if you have a real Cartier love bracelet in Tanzania or in Kenya, automatically that kind of shows that you're different, because it's not something you're going to see every day. The same thing, if you have, a Celine handbag or a Celine luggage bag, and if we can spot immediately that it's Celine, that kind of says something, doesn't it? It just says that, oh, okay, that person loves luxury, that person is thinking a bit differently. That doesn't mean that you have to buy luxury products to be seen differently, but I think it just kind of puts you in this kind of exclusive group, because not everyone here is going to be buying luxury products. it goes without saying that you do need to have funds or have some sort of liquidity to purchase these products. They are expensive, there is no doubt about it. And then when you convert them into local currency, they are even more expensive. Which kind of brings me on to the controversy around the African luxury goods industry. Many people do feel like a lot of people who have benefited from the sort of luxury spending are people who have gotten their money through ill-gotten gains. Now, whether that's true or not, to me, is kind of outside the scope of this documentary. But what I will say is I don't really feel like that says the full side of the story. Because at the end of the day, if someone purchases something in New York in a boutique or in Paris or at Harrods in London, does that mean that their money is cleaner than someone who buys a Porsche in Lagos or in Abuja? I'm not really sure that that's fair. But what I do think is that the people who are buying luxury products, they know that ultimately, if you're buying a luxury product, you probably have all your ducks in a row, because these are things that can easily be traced. You know, who's going to walk into Cartier to buy a $10,000 bracelet in Africa in cash? It's highly unlikely that you'll see something like that. It's not out of the ordinary, but it's not necessarily something that's going to be happening every day. I also think African luxury goods customers are people who are probably entrepreneurs, they're small business owners, they are perhaps also kind of legacy socialites. I think for some of you listening, you might not know that there are a lot of African people who were kind of born into money once the colonies had been decolonized and once African nations had kind of risen up in their own form. So you do have a kind of social elite in various countries, specifically Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania to a lesser extent, of people of sort of millennials who have grown up rich. In China, they would call them the Fuerdai. That's the name, I believe, in Mandarin for the sort of first generation Chinese young people who were born into wealth. I definitely think that's happening now here as well on the continent, and you can see it through Instagram and things like that. But it's definitely prevalent also in Côte d'Ivoire, in Francophone West Africa. Luxury brands, luxury shopping, going to Paris or going to Belgium for luxury goods is very popular in the Francophone part of Africa, so Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea, etc. So I think that's also something to note, that there is this kind of, they're relatively hidden. People don't really talk about them. The same way in Britain, there is like a kind of socialite culture. But I wouldn't say that there's like a socialite culture in Africa that's kind of overt, because I think people feel like it's very gauche to be kind of overly about like having a kind of partying lifestyle, but it definitely exists, and they are going to be a massive part of the luxury spending as well. Some of them are influencers, some of them fly under the radar and don't have Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts, so it completely depends. And then I also think you have the sort of classic aspirational shoppers, people who, you know, love brands, but maybe just have a standard job and are working, saving money, putting money aside, and to buy themselves something special. So those are the segments I believe exist for the African luxury industry. Jewelry plays a massive role in the luxury industry on the continent. In my country, Tanzanite is a massive industry, and there are Tanzanian locals who are buying Tanzanite, but it's still not as much as foreign buyers, such as the Chinese. So I think one of the biggest questions to ask is, where does the luxury industry on the continent go from here? I think if the pandemic hadn't happened, things would kind of be growing at a faster clip, because most of the economies on the continent have been doing very well. Johann Rupert recently did an interview. It's linked in the Financial Times, which is behind a paywall, which is annoying. But Johann Rupert talked about how he thinks it's going to take a few years for Cartier to kind of recover from the pandemic. And I could see that being true for the luxury end as well. You know, maybe some people feel like it is a bit gauche and a bit, you know, off to be spending, you know, tens of thousands on jewelry when things are going badly for the people. But at the same time, if your finances or your lifestyle allows you to, purchase luxury products, then as long as you're doing it responsibly, that's fine. But Johan Rupert's interview was very interesting, and obviously he's the owner of the Richemont Group, which owns Cartier. So that was very interesting to me just to hear what he had to say. And I can imagine on the African end, the boutique itself in Santon City, it probably will see like a decline in customers in terms of the fact that many of the clientele for these luxury brands in Africa are other African tourists. So Pan-African tourists, Nigerians, Ghanaians, Kenyans, Tanzanians, people from the DRC, people from Congo Brazzaville, people from Angola. Okay, so that kind of leads to the question of, will the African luxury industry continue to survive and to thrive, or will it take some time, to chill out for a bit? I think we probably will see a decline, and then eventually, as our economies continue to grow and get better, once things calm down from the virus, things probably will get back to normal eventually. But like he said, it might take years, it might take some time. But my kind of general comment is about how the luxury goods industry is seen in Africa. Now, I want to share like a juicy tidbit that I read, and I remember reading this article a few years ago, and there was like a video about it as well, and it's from 2012, okay, and it's from 2012. It's by the BBC. It's from 2012 and it's by the BBC. It's actually a video clip, and I will link it in the description. It's worth a watch. And 2012 was an interesting time for Angola. It's about the growth of the Porsche business in Angola. 2012 was a very interesting time for Angola. The country was just kind of pulling itself together. It has got absolutely fabulous oil wealth. It is horrifically rich in oil. It's dripping in oil. So there are a lot of petrodollars that have kind of been dripping out of the country and therefore dripping into the country. And there have been some really interesting articles and, kind of anecdotes about how the streets of the Angolan capital, Luanda, are like full of Porsches and luxury cars and Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all these types of things. So I think that also just kind of shows you like how things are changing in the continent. That is from 2012. So that's like, about 8 years ago. But if 8 years ago, luxury cars like Porsches were booming in Angola, and that's just one country, that kind of gives you a context. And Africa's industry and GDP has been growing like just so much for each African country. So that kind of just gives you an idea of how the luxury market in Africa is very diverse depending on the country. Africa is not a country, as we know. But as you can tell, the luxury market in Africa has been growing and booming in different countries in different ways. Some countries love cars, some countries love jewelry, some countries love fashion, some countries love luxury boats. In my country, Tanzania, there are many people who have private yachts and private, schooners and dinghies and all these gorgeous, kind of Monaco-esque, little boats and yachts. So that's also something that's booming as well. So the luxury goods industry in Africa is not what you think. When you think of Africa, you probably don't think of, Porsches in Luanda. You probably don't think of Bentley, Mulsans in Nairobi. And I've seen a Mulsan in Nairobi. And you probably don't think of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, in Dar es Salaam. And I've seen those cars, multiple of those cars in Dar es Salaam as well. So I think that just kind of goes to the point that the African luxury goods industry is not what it seems. And I think it's a massively untapped market. And I think the brands that have invested in Africa early are the ones who are truly going to reap the benefits when our continent and our countries become very financially successful, maybe within the next 5, 10, 15 years. And these are just some of the brands that, to me, I feel like have been very clever in investing in Africa early. So I'll just say them really quickly. Obviously, Cartier. Prada has a boutique in South Africa, and I believe there's also one in one of the North African nations. Louis Vuitton, of course. I also would like to talk about, of course, I think I just mentioned Porsche, but Porsche has invested so much in Africa. Ferrari as well are also in South Africa. I just want to um, double check that, but Porsche, yeah, Ferrari are there as well. So I think that just kind of highlights to you the fact that even Ferrari is in South Africa, it just kind of shows that there's so much potential for the growth of the African luxury industry. And it kind of leads to the question, what about homegrown African luxury? And this is where I think things get very controversial. And I think many people feel quite irritated at how some African consumers only want to buy foreign things, but they don't necessarily want to buy locally homegrown products or brands. This is not about colonialism, imperialism, or all that other heavy stuff. This is more about status and marking yourself as something different. If you can buy a Goyard, handbag from France or from Paris, and if you can get the handbag shipped in from Paris, that just marks you as different. And I really want to highlight, I think particularly in Tanzania, and I would guess it's the same for other African nations, being different and being unique is very important. Yes, Goya make, I'm sure they make thousands of bags a year. But if I'm living in Dar es Salaam or Nairobi, are there many people that have Goya? Probably not. So that just kind of puts me in that different echelon, and that makes me feel different as a consumer. I'm just trying to explain the psychology of how African luxury consumers think. Now, what do you think of all of this? Is this too much? Should African luxury consumers be conspicuous? Is conspicuous consumption on the continent a good idea? Is it a bad idea? I mean, tell me what you think. This was my very first Glamazon Originals. Make sure you subscribe to my channel for more, and don't